Hello, and welcome to this week's yoga class. In our pranayama workshop this week, we looked at the idea of complexity and optionality. This is the idea that as we age, we tend to lose options, and that one of the ways to help age gracefully is to push back against that process by increasing optionality. Another way to think about this is increasing our comfort zone. As we get older, we tolerate less extremes of temperature. That's a reason people move to Florida, for instance. In some of the monastic traditions in Japan and other places, China, they deliberately have the monks learn how to tolerate greater heat, but also how to tolerate greater cold. They take showers under waterfalls in the mountains, for instance. So by learning how to push down against fear and push up against heat, or to push out against those two, we have some space in between in which we're comfortable. So as we age, that space shrinks down on us in all directions, whether it's our endocrine system becoming more flat-lined as opposed to a little bit more variety. It's in our fascia, in our joints, in our movements, in our habits, in our patterns, in what we watch on TV, what books we read. In all of these ways, our universe has a tendency to shrink down, just like a muscle that isn't used will tighten up over time. Okay? So we want to take a look today in terms of both of our pranayama, but also about ways we can push back against that tendency in our physical practice. Okay. Let's start off with pranayama though. There are many different habits and patterns we can fall into. In the pranayama workshop, we focus primarily on the breathing rhythm. Okay? The rhythm at which you breathe in and you breathe out. So one game I'll play sometimes is to take 4 dice and roll them. Imagine that our 4 numbers are 4, 4, 6, 1. Okay? For beginners and intermediate students, you don't want to start there. You want to start from a place of comfort. Okay? For experienced students, you may be able to drop right into that comfortably, but what I recommend is starting off with something familiar like 4-4. So breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4, and then in and out. And then see how you do with 4-4-4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. If that causes any discomfort, you back off just enough, like maybe 4, 2, 4. You back off just enough that you're comfortable. If you are already comfortable though, you take the next step. So perhaps you could go breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 6. Okay, and not controlling the bottom at all. So try that. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and then breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When that becomes comfortable, you add the count of 1 at the bottom. Let's try that one time. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and continue. Then the next day, I take 4 dice, I roll them, and then it takes me a few minutes to get comfortable with that breathing pattern. It may mean that I take a few days or a few weeks to gradually get that. But in this way, I developed the ability to breathe with different rhythms and to do so comfortably. The key here is we stay in our comfort zone. In yoga we talk about sentosa, about contentment, about being relaxed and enjoying the present moment. And then tapas is about trying to improve, trying to be something in the future, trying to move towards a specific future. And we want to be able to stay in that state of sentosis even as we move along. And an analogy, traveling. It's the ability to get from point A to point B, but to enjoy the journey. Okay? So, now, on your own, choose a different rhythm of breathing that you haven't done before, but that allows you to stay within your comfort zone. It may be a little challenging, but still comfortable. Okay? And just pick 2 numbers, breathing in and out, or 3 numbers, breathe in, hold, breathe out, or 4 numbers if you're more advanced, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. And practice that on your own, whatever pattern you've chosen. If you begin to struggle, cheat enough that you're comfortable. Close your eyes, lengthen the spine, open the heart, broaden the shoulder girdle, but above all, relax into your posture. As you're practicing your pranayama, begin relaxing your face, your forehead, your eyebrows, your eyelids, the eyeballs, the jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. If the pattern you've chosen isn't working for you, try adjusting it just enough that this becomes comfortable. And then we'll continue with whatever breathing pattern you've chosen as we move into our seated twist. Leading with the right shoulder. Lifting, drawing the shoulder blade around and down, finding the floor with your fingertips, crossing the left hand over the opposite knee. Lifting, expanding, rotating. And in this position, breathing with the pattern you've chosen. If that is difficult, ease up on the twist a little bit and maintain the quality of your breathing. If it is easy, rotate a little bit more strongly. Take a breath or 2 in this position. And then coming back to center. Reestablishing the pattern if you've lost it, and then taking it with you into the second side, reaching around with the left shoulder blade, crossing the right hand over. Lift, expand, rotate, and then breathing into this position. Take a couple more breaths. Coming back to center. Circling with the ribs. And reversing directions. And then rolling out the shoulders. And coming back to center. Let's try a side stretch. If you wish to continue exploring your pranayama, staying with the same pattern or choosing a different pattern, you can. If you want to focus on the physicality of the practice, though, pick a pattern that is easy enough that you don't have to think about it as much, and then use your awareness to focus on the physical. Side stretch, taking your right fingertips to the floor. Float the left arm overhead. Bring your chest forward and up. Bring your left shoulder blade back and down. Walk the right fingertips away slightly. And continue taking the chest forward and up, shoulder blade back and down. Flare the ribs. And then breathing into this position. Now, not only can we experiment with the rhythm of our breathing, but we can also experiment with what parts of our lungs we're breathing into and in what order we breathe into them. So, for instance, I could do a complete back breath, or I could breathe just in the abdomen, or I could breathe into the belly, into the chest, into the back, and then into the pelvic floor, and then into the collarbones. Okay. Again, what's significant is there isn't one way of breathing right. We want to increase our comfort zone. Cultivate the ability to breathe in thousands of different ways and be absolutely comfortable doing so. Take a breath or two. And as we cross to the second side, taking the chest forward and up, shoulder back and down, walk the left fingertips away, flare the ribs, and then bring your attention to the areas that you breathe into and see if you can break free from that habit, from that rut, and change it up a little bit. Experiment with breathing in to different areas or breathing into those areas in a different sequence. Remember, the entire time we want to stay in our comfort zone. We're trying to expand our comfort zone, not leave it behind, but take it with us. Couple more breaths. Coming back to center, circling with the ribs and reversing and rolling out the shoulders and the shoulder blades. Coming back to center. Next we'll work with Dandasana with staff pose. You'll be sitting with your legs extended. Draw the flesh out from the sit bones. Reach the sit bones back. Tilt the pelvis forward. Okay, good. Now, there are many different ways that we can change up this pose a little bit to add some variety and to learn how to be comfortable with and a variety of options in how we practice this pose. So first, let's experiment with bending the knees. Now, bending the knees helps to release the hamstrings if they're tight, which for some people is critical. But it doesn't mean that we can't still get a good workout. Take your fingertips to the floor and then bring your belly forward, lift your chest up, roll the shoulder blades back and down, chest forward and up, and then without leaning on the hands, just touching the floor and then breathing and then really emphasize the lengthening of the spine. By bending the knees, we take the legs out of the equation somewhat, so we can focus more on lifting and broadening, expanding, opening through the upper body. 2 more breaths. Oh, 1 more breath. Now, those of you who do have tight hamstrings, straighten your legs just to where you're getting a little stretch, but keep them as bent as you need to be able to still be safe and not to round. If you straighten your legs and you lose control of your torso, then bend the knees and reestablish that length in the spine. Those of you that are a little more flexible, straighten the legs. So now we can look at the spacing of our feet. If you normally have your feet together, spread them hip width. If you normally have them in both of those 2 positions, try spreading them a little more or even more, and then working with Dandasana. 2 or 3 breaths. Lifting, opening, broadening, breathing. 1 more breath. And then bringing your feet back hip width, bounce and roll. We can emphasize lengthening the back of the legs more, flexing through the heels. Reach the heels forward, reach the sit bones back, tilt the pelvis, and then try to pull your toes back, reach your heels forward until your heels start to come off the ground a little bit, and then lift the chest. Now those of you with tight hamstrings, keep the knees bent, heels on the ground. And then 2 or 3 breaths working with Tadasana. Emphasize reaching the heels away, reaching the sit bone back, pulling the toes towards you. It's going to give you a stronger engagement in the quadriceps, a little bit more of a workout there. And then bounce, roll. So what else can we play with? Well, we can take a look at the pronation of the feet, and we can experiment with that. So tendency is for the outside of the feet to move away from you, the inner edge of your feet to draw in towards you, and for the feet to splay out. So let's do the opposite in all 3 ways. Internally rotate your thighs. Spread the feet enough that you can do that. And then instead of taking the little toe forward, reach the big toe forward, pull the little toe towards you. Spread the toes wide. Rotate in. And then lift through the chest. And here you're going to feel the action move into the outer thighs and hips. Good. By definition, cramping is not comfortable. So when I talk about staying in your comfort zone, obviously don't work to the point that you start to cramp. If you do, don't hold, bounce, shake out, and then just do a regular Dandasana. Take a breath or 2, lifting the chest, rolling the shoulders back, and then bounce the knees, roll the feet, bend and straighten. So with any and all of our poses, we can begin to think of new ways to add some options, to try different ways of working. And what you'll find is anything you change within the pose is going to shift the stretch, it's going to shift the contraction, and give us a little bit of a better workout. One thing we've learned about fascia is it hates repetition. It loves variety and complexity. So the more we expand out of a narrow rut in our yoga practice, the more beneficial our practice will become. Shift your weight over to one hip. Sweep your knees behind you. Coming to your hands and knees for cat-cow. Turn sideways here. As you start each movement, start from the tailbone. Lift the tailbone, open the belly, open the chest, look up, breathe in. Tuck the tailbone, round the back, mid-back, low back, upper back, exhale. Start with the tailbone, finish with the head, breathing in and breathing out. Couple more times. And back to neutral. Now, reverse the breathing. As you lift the tailbone, start exhaling. Finish exhaling as you lift your head. And then as you breathe in, tuck the tailbone round low back, mid back, upper back, and inhale. So doing cat-cow, but with the opposite breathing pattern. And then back into child's pose, resting your forehead on the floor. Arms extended, knees hip width or a little bit wider. 2 or 3 breaths here. And coming back to table. And this time improvising. Improvisation is a great opportunity to begin to break out of ruts. So for instance, add a little asymmetry by repositioning one hand and then experiment with moving. Try to create a feeling, a sensation that feels good and begin to move that through the body. And every 2 or 3 breaths, reposition your hands and continue to experiment, to explore, to feel your way around. And a couple of regular cat-cows. And back to neutral. Next we'll work with the back roll. If you have some type of a back roller, you can use that. If you don't have anything handy, take your blanket, fold it long and thin, and then roll it up from one edge to the other, rolling it nice and tight. If you're new to this, I have a video on my website that shows you how to use and also how to make your own back roll. If it's a little bit intense, you unroll the blanket. If it's too easy, you roll it up larger. And we start with the roller underneath the shoulders with the arms extended. And then breathing into this position. And try a variety of different positions for your arms, as long as your elbow is above the roller. If you can't relax, unroll the blanket or put a pillow under your head or under your hips, adjusting to stay comfortable. We want to increase variety and options of comfort. If you're right at the edge where you aren't sure if it's comfortable or not, take a few breaths and see whether or not your body starts to relax or continues to resist the pose. And if it continues resisting, then you're in too deep. Back away enough that Within a breath or two, you can feel yourself starting to relax into the position. Occasionally, lift your hips with your legs, push yourself across the roller 1 or 2 inches, set the hips down, so the roller will work its way down the length of your spine over the next 3 minutes. And in each position, breathing deeply and relaxing. Should be about halfway down the length of your spine. If not, you might want to speed up a little. Some of you may have already finished, in which case go back and start over. When the roller's in the lower back, it's easier to move the roller. So you hold the roller with your hands, lift your hips high, and then reposition the roller and set your hips down again. What started out as a good size for your back roll may be a little bit intense or too easy as you move into the mid and then into the low back. So occasionally, if you need to, adjust the size of your roller. 10 or 15 more breaths. If there's any area you've neglected, finish up with the roller in that position. When you're finished, lift the hips off the floor. Take your roller and pull it out from underneath you. And then set the hips down. Draw the knees in. Rock side to side. One repetition of bridge. Bring your feet to the floor, close to the hips, hip width apart. Bridge is an inversion, so feel free just to come up part way, especially if you have high blood pressure, heart disease, if you're pregnant, or any other reason, glaucoma, for not increasing blood pressure in the head. You can still do the pose. Just lift your hips a few inches. For those of you that want to continue, keep lifting. And if it gets too easy, you can walk your feet in a little closer, lift a little higher. Lengthen the back of your neck. The hands can either interlace, or they can support the pelvis, or you can grab your ankles, roll the shoulders together and lift. 5 or 10 more breaths. And this pose, notice where you breathe into, what areas of the lungs, and in what order you breathe in when you aren't really thinking about it so much. And then see if you can breathe into areas that you've been neglecting. Or perhaps change up the order in which you breathe into these different areas. Two or three more breaths. Now lift your heels off the ground, so all the weight's on the toes. Lift up a little higher into the pose, and then without losing that extra height, see if you can find the floor with your heels
not by collapsing, but by lengthening through the heels into the floor. Take 1 or 2 more breaths, pushing through the feet, lifting the hips, rolling the shoulders together. On the way down, roll down 1 vertebra at a time like a zipper. Try and feel each vertebra finding the floor before the next. Keep your hips off the ground until you can find the floor with your low back. Then the hips. Bring the knees into your chest, hug your knees, rock side to side. Now we're going to practice coming out of bridge, and I'm going to show you a little bit more complicated way, but a way that is very handy, especially for those that have low back issues. But it's a good way for almost anyone to come out of the pose. So first, come back into the pose just a little bit, lifting your hips a few inches, maybe 6 inches. Now start coming down, but before your hips quite touch the floor. When your hips are about to touch the floor, root through 1 foot and lift the other knee. Pull that knee into your chest, and that is going to rotate the pelvis, lengthen the small of the back, then set the small of your back on the floor and lift the other knee. Rock side to side. Next we'll be working a little bit with Cobra and downward facing dog. When you're ready, come on to your stomach. Any variation of Cobra is fine. Those of you that aren't sure, start off with your hands well behind the shoulders. Fingers spread wide, middle finger pointing straight ahead. Shrug the shoulders, roll the shoulders, open the heart. And then breathing into this position. 2 or 3 breaths. Downward facing dog. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, reach the hips back, spread the fingers wide. And again, notice, how does your body tend to breathe in this posture when you aren't paying attention? And then deliberately choose to add a little variety to that, to change up the rhythm of the breath, the shape of the breath, the sequence in which parts of your body and your lungs you breathe into. Anything at all. 3 or 4 breaths. And coming back for Cobra. So Cobra is a great pose to explore options. So let's try the Sphinx position. Bring your forearms in front of you, shoulder width apart, arms parallel. Now, walk your elbows away until your lowest ribs, the floating ribs, touch the floor. And if you find that more of your rib cage is on the floor, walk your hands back until most of the ribs are lifted, just the bottom 2 touching.
If that is a little bit awkward or strenuous, walk your hands away from you until you feel safe and comfortable. Now, in this position, press the tops of the feet into the floor, lift the knees off the ground, engage the back muscles, reach the chest forward, roll the shoulder blades back and down. And here you can find a nice little workout without having to lift off the ground or work any other way, just by directly engaging the muscles. But now we can experiment a little bit. Now, because we're experimenting, a lot of caution, a lot of common sense. Don't do anything that feels unsafe. I'm going to cross my hand over, take one hand towards the opposite elbow, and then take the other arm and place the palm on the floor and just twist and look over your shoulder. Minimize the twist. We're really doing Cobra. We're just adding a little bit of a rotation to make it more interesting. So the twist should be very subtle. The Cobra should be strong. And then coming back to Sphinx. And then crossing to the opposite side. Bring one hand over to the opposite elbow, and then the other hand, place the palm on the ground under the shoulder or out to the side, and then lift and rotate slightly. Press the feet down, reach the chest forward, roll the shoulders back. Oh, imagine 90% is Cobra, and then just 10% rotating slightly just to make it interesting. Kind of experiment. Until it feels right. There's a sense of knowing when it feels healthy. Coming back to Sphinx. And then bring the hands in a little bit. Tuck the toes, downward facing dog. This will be our last work before we start to slow down a little bit. So if you have a lot of energy, begin to really work the downward facing dog. Reach the heels towards the floor, lift the tailbone towards the ceiling. Pull your chest towards your feet, float the shoulder blades away from your feet. Root through the ball of the index finger. Hollow the inner armpits, broaden the upper back, lengthen the spine. Whenever you decide you're ready to slow down, come into Pigeon Pose, leading with the right knee coming forward and setting the right knee on the floor. If you want to stay in down dog a little longer though, feel free to stay there until you're ready. So bringing the right knee forward, the right foot is out to the side slightly, and then walk your left foot back and then sink to your elbows or to your chest. We're going to be doing a little bit more hip work, so this is just a warm-up. If you already have a big stretch, move your left leg to the left and forward. We're just trying to allow these muscles to wake up and warm up at their own speed. Remember, even when we are engaged in tapas, in effort, effort is rooted in time. Effort is about moving from where you are to a different future. Even when we are rooted in that tapas, in that drive to improve. That doesn't mean that we lose our connection to Santosa, to contentment. So we take the contentment with us on that journey. Breathing, relaxing, shifting. 4 or 5 breaths. And you can roll the hips a little to the left or to the right. You can reposition the back leg. You can walk your elbows around a little bit.
Once again, looking for variety, complexity, and creating new options for how you explore this pose. Take a breath or two. Stretch the exhale. Downward facing dog. We won't hold as long. 3 or 4 breaths. Bringing the left leg through. Slide the right leg back. Find a gentle, comfortable sensation. If you're going to make a mistake, much better to be in too shallow than too deep. If you come in too deep, you trigger a defense mechanism that can take minutes, hours, days, weeks, or years to calm down again. So better to be a little more patient, to take just a little bit more time relaxing into the pose. And in the end, you'll find you end up going further, deeper, but from a place of pleasure. Again, you can experiment shifting or rolling your hips a little to the left or to the right. Stretching the exhale slightly into a sigh. Two or three more breaths. One more downward facing dog. Two or three breaths. Now from here we're going to come into a low lunge. Set the left knee on the floor. Lift the right hand. Step your right foot all the way up so that as you lunge, your knee is above the heel, not coming out over the toes. If your knees are sensitive to pressure, put a blanket underneath the knee to give it a little extra padding. Now we're going to be working with the front leg and the outer thigh and the hip. So take your right leg and begin to lean the right knee to the right a little bit. And bring your hand to the inside of the thighs. Maybe walk your hands around to the left slightly. Now in this position we have almost infinite possibilities and options to explore. So for instance, how far over do I roll my knee, or how more do I bring it to vertical? Whether I walk my hands to the left or walk my hands to the right. I can reposition the back leg. I can take my hips back, and I can bring my hips forward. I can drop to my elbows. 10 or 15 breaths on your own. And find safe, comfortable, pleasant sensation, and then move that slowly through the body. The closer to your edge you are, the more carefully and slowly you move and the more attention you pay. Five or six more breaths. Couple more breaths. Bring your knee back to vertical. Tuck the toes on the back foot and then lift back into down dog. And then stepping, or put the right knee on the floor, lift the left hand, step the left foot up into a lunge. Let your left knee drop to the left. And then experiment how far over you lean the leg. Experiment with where you put your hands. You can move your back leg forward, or you can walk it back further. You can take your hips forward or back. Straighten the left leg more or bend it more. And the entire time focus on relaxing and breathing. Stretching the exhale. Try to find a few new positions and then learn how to become comfortable. How to find comfort, and even better, how to find pleasure. Expanding our range of comfort. The same way you might stretch a muscle. Five or six or seven or eight more breaths, stretching the exhale. Two or three breaths. When you're finished, come back into your lunge, and then coming back for cat-cow. Back to neutral, and then a reclining twist, and we can experiment and increase our options here. So for instance, I can bring both knees to the chest and roll. I can keep my feet on the ground and roll both knees. I can bring one knee to the chest and keep the other knee bent, or I can straighten the leg, and as I rotate, I can anchor the knee and let the arm float, or I can keep the shoulder anchored and just drop the knee over and let it hang. If you feel any kink, any pinch, do a little cat-cow, very gently, very small movement with the hips, or reposition the rib cage. Keep experimenting until you find a position that is comfortable. Then focus in on your breathing. Notice the body's habit. the habitual way the body breathes in this particular pose. And then either change up the sequence of where you breathe into first and then second and last, or change up where you breathe. Find an area that you have not been breathing into and add it into the breath cycle. 5 or 6 or 7 more breaths. Couple more breaths. Switching sides. Come back to center. Hug the knees in. Rock side to side. And then whatever leg variation you worked with. And then deciding whether to keep your shoulder anchored and let the arm hang, or keep the knee anchored. Experiment with positioning of your arm until you find a neutral position that's comfortable. Then turn your attention to the habit of breath and deliberately create a new option for breathing. Small steps. Above all, make sure you're still practicing Sentosa contentment, that you're comfortable and enjoying your practice, even as you work to increase variety, complexity, and optionality. Three or four more breaths on the second side. Take a breath or two. Then hug your knees, rock side to side. Coming into Shavasana. Make sure you're comfortable. Give yourself permission to adjust, fidget, reposition. When you're completely satisfied, with an exhale, let your whole body become heavier. Relax the face, the neck and shoulders, the arms, the hands, the fingers. The feet, the ankles, the calves, the knees and thighs. Loosen hips, relax the buttocks, the low back, the belly, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the back of the neck, and soften the throat. Jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. Tip of the tongue, the belly and root of the tongue. The eyeballs, the space beneath, behind, around the eyes. The eyebrows, the forehead, temples soft and hollow, the scalp and crown. Notice how your body breathes in this position, and then ever so delicately just nudge the breath into a new pattern. Or perhaps initiating the inhale in a different area of the lungs. Now slowly, lazily begin to move. Maybe even yawning, stretching. Add a little variety to your stretch. Contracting, expanding, twisting, pandiculating. When you're ready,
Roll up to a comfortable seated position. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. The ideas that we explored in our physical body with our breath and with our movements, our asana, this idea of noticing where we have fallen into habit, into a rut, where we've gotten used to doing things in a particular way and repeating that way over and over and over again, leads to a shrinking down, a contraction of options. Identifying those and then beginning to deliberately push back on them, to expand them, to create a larger space in which we can live comfortably. Okay? This applies not just to asana or to breath, but we can also apply it to our life in the broadest sense of the words. What books you choose to read, what movies you watch, whether you have the shower turned just to the right level, or whether occasionally you increase your tolerance for a hotter shower, and then on other days increase your tolerance for a lower shower. Again, we aren't trying to endure, we're trying to expand our comfort zone. So learning how to actually enjoy a cooler shower or a hotter shower. In as many different ways as we can, identifying where we can expand and push back on this contraction that is a normal part of the aging process, if left unchecked. But we all know people who are older who have deliberately chosen to grow and to grow younger over time rather than to grow older. I'd like to thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you can join us next week. Namaste.